Cloud. We are good to go. Oh, let me admit everyone in. Now we're good to go.
Okay, so being 6:30 p.m. and having quorum on Wednesday, September 6th, 2023, I'll call the Bridgewater Planning Board to order. That's item 1. Item 2, we have some public hearings.
Oh, yeah. And I think it is supposed to be more clarified the next few days, so even though it's hot, it might not be any.
So before I open the first public hearing, I'll read the meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions of the open meeting law. Pursuant to the governor's approval of a supplemental budget bill, temporary provisions pertaining to the open meeting law have been extended to March 31st, 2025. Specifically, this further extension allows for public bodies to continue to hold meetings remotely without a quorum, with the public body being physically present at the meeting location, and to provide adequate and alternative access to remote meetings. The language of this extension does not make any substantive changes to the open meeting law, other than extending the expiration date, the temporary provisions regarding remote meetings from March 31st, 2023 to March 31st, 2025. Members of the public are encouraged to participate remotely and shall address questions through the chair of the board. Additionally, we will note the following. So if we do have a public hearing this evening and it does allow for public comment, we just ask that you state your name and address for the record. We also make sure that you're audible to all participants. The following Bridgewater members of the planning board are participating remotely this evening. I'm Patrick Driscoll, the chair, Mr. Raymond Ajemian, Mr. Michael McDonald, the vice chair, Ms. Astrid Rojas, and we have an alternate member this evening, Ms. MJ Spagon. During the meeting, all votes will be roll call. The following Bridgewater town staff is also participating remotely. Mr. Robert Rulli, Community Economic Development Director, Mr. Shane O'Brien, town planner, Mr. Greg Tansey, the town engineer, Mr. Stephen Solari, the building commissioner, and Ms. Tristy Jane, the assistant planner. At this time, everyone's mics are muted. The board's mics will be unmuted through the whole meeting. And as items appear on the agenda, the project's representatives' mics will be unmuted. If the project is a public hearing and allows for public comment, we ask that you use the chat feature to ask your question by listing your name, your address, and your question. The chair or the host will recognize questions in order. You can also use the raise my hand feature in the participant menu. And you'll be unmuted when the chair or the host recognizes you. Again, please state your name and address before asking a question. If you're on the phone, you could dial *9 to raise your hand. The first public hearing this evening we have is for 168, 180, 232, and 240 Broad Street. I'm going to step back because I'm not participating in this hearing and turn that over to Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. Mr. O'Brien, I believe you've received a correspondence requesting a continuation of this. Is that correct?
That is correct. We received a email a couple days ago from Stephen Meltzer requesting a continuance of the Broad Street item to the October 4th, 2023 meeting at 6:30 p.m. So we're just looking for the board to accept that continuance to that date.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll set a motion to extend the meeting to October, what, Shane, 28th, you said?
Yeah, I'd be continuing the public hearing to October 4th, 2023. At 6:30 p.m.
I'll second it. Nobody else has.
Okay. We'll open for discussion.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. As I indicated to the town planner, I have another commitment on that date, and so I've got to make a decision as to which meeting to go to. But I think we should at some point discuss if a particular request for another date for hearing is whether we automatically accept it or do we actually suggest a different date. Nothing now. I'm just saying, just gone through my mind.
Yeah, that will present a tricky situation if you're unable to attend. That's for sure.
Well, my point is, what if the board doesn't want a particular date that the proponent has requested? Do we simply accept it, or do we simply say no, that date will not work? I think that's
May May I comment on that, Mr. Chair?
Of course.
Just in terms of the comment for this particular project, Ray, they were prepared to provide some of their plans for this meeting today. But we advised them and discussed with them that it would be better to come in with a full set of plans to present to the board rather than provide, what they were going to provide. So they believe that October 4th date, they'll be able to provide updated plans. And I think as well, I don't believe that the board will be making a decision at that date. So I am confident that you will be able to partake and also file a Mullen report, Mullen form for that meeting, watch the meeting. And if you have any comments on this matter, I'm happy to share them with the applicant, as well as I have to provide a review as well. So I don't believe that the applicant at that October 4th meeting is getting out of there with a decision. So I'm confident in the October 4th date, and it allows us to kind of meet our schedule with this and flip-flopping with Claremont in terms of having them on different meeting dates.
No, I understand that, and I'll also make a decision as to which meeting I'm going to go to, but my question was in general. Do we simply accept a proponent's request for an extension, or do we pick a different date? That's all.
I would say typically we would honor the request. It would really come down to the applicant's inability to fulfill certain dates. So I believe in this, and this is just my own opinion, and kind of you guys can dissect it as is. I believe the applicant can get these plans to us for a staff review as well as a board review for the October 4th meeting.
But I'm just curious now too with what Ray's saying, but as a matter of principle and procedure, we could choose to pick another date to continue it to if we so desired. Is that correct?
I actually think this conversation is an administrative matter, not the subject of this public hearing.
Well, I'm discussing the motion presented and whether or not it could be.
You're discussing a date. I mean, so you can either deny or approve the request for a continuation.
Let me just clarify. I will vote for the continuation, and I understand what Shane is saying. I'm just saying at some point we should discuss how to do this in the future. That's all.
And that's what I'm suggesting. You can put it on as an administrative matter for general discussion, not just for this application, but for all applications going forward.
Yeah, I'm happy to have a discussion at a future, obviously not the October 4th meeting, but we can have it at a future meeting, right?
October 4th meeting. I understand.
Obvious. Sure, we can have it as a future item. We can add that as part of the planner report. But
yeah, sounds like a good idea moving forward. But I agree, we should just continue forward with this one as it is now. So I guess to the roll call vote here. Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
Mrs. Rojas?
Yes.
Mrs. Pagone?
I do not know where MJ went.
Yes.
Oh, MJ was yes. Sorry.
And
Sorry.
I'm a yes.
Mike was off.
All right. I shall let the applicant know. Thank you, guys.
Okay, I think I'll pass it back to Mr. Driscoll.
All right, so continuing on, we have a second public hearing this evening. This is 385 North Street, also known as Old Stable Estates, map 32, lot 9. This is a proposed 3-lot subdivision, definitive subdivision pursuant to the Planning Board subdivision rules and regulations, continued from August 16th, 2023. I know we received a revised plan set. We received some correspondence from Mr. O'Brien, and we also received the third and fourth technical reviews from Mr. Tanzi, the town engineer. So why don't we turn it over to the applicant if they want to go over any revisions or changes or to address anything that Mr. Tanzi has brought up, and then we can have board questions. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Silver Engineering.
I believe we have Larry and Rebecca here.
If you have anything to add, if not, we
need to mute myself. Larry Silva from Silver Engineering Associates, and Rebecca Baptista is with me also. Really, basically, there were some outstanding items that were technical issues as it related to drainage and so forth, that there was correspondence back and forth, and Greg was very prompt in terms of being able to get us responses on the third review, and then allowed us to resolve the last item on the fourth review. There was not anything of real substance from possibly the board's perspective, but from a technical point of view, there were some housekeeping issues that had to be satisfied in order to satisfy Greg's comments.
Mr. Tanzi, do you have anything to add? I saw the fourth technical review came through and then there's a response this afternoon. Are you comfortable with that response?
I am. They submitted some supplemental calculations and I reviewed those this afternoon, and they resolved that last remaining outstanding comment. So they have responded to all of my comments satisfactorily.
And that was in regard to the pre and the post, the 90%, and they still meet it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, great. Any other staff comments or anything from Mr. Silva's office at this point?
Do you have anything, Larry?
No, I think that I think that everything that you guys asked for, we took care of, and I think the design is more in keeping with what the board wanted for these smaller subdivisions.
Are there any board questions at this point? I just have one, Mr. Silva. I know at the last meeting we talked about the tree plantings having to be outside of the layout, and I can see all the drainages in the layout. Is there a waiver request for the plantings, or do you plan to satisfy the planting requirement of the board?
We plan to satisfy.
Yeah, we plan to satisfy.
So even though there are gaps in that 40-foot offset, we can make that a condition that trees will be planted every 40 feet?
That's correct.
Has a tree species or have tree species been selected from the approved tree list yet? I didn't see that on the plan.
No, not at this time.
But it was stated, Mr. Chair, that they would conform to our subdivision rules and regulations. I know we're discussing amendments to the subdivision rules and regulations at today's meeting, so they would be subject to the prior ones. But we would hope.
That's what I was going to ask. Could we ask that they comply with the new tree species?
I would say we can't force them to comply, but I would suggest that they look at species that are on both, just in the kindness of their hearts.
All right.
Can someone share that with us so I can inform?
Yeah, I can't really commit to something that we really don't.
You guys, well, you guys are going to conform to the current list, anyways,
that's right.
but
Yes.
we can provide the updated list, and if you want to stay for the presentation, by all means.
I mean, I would say if you want to make in part of the recommendation to approve would be that you know, that you would request that the applicant
Consider
choose species that are in a revised subdivision regulation.
Yeah, I think the main difference is the Bradford pear got removed just because it was causing so much damage in town. They break easy, so.
So why don't you just say with the exception from the tree list, with the exception of the pear?
Like,
in other words, you can exclude that from your decision.
I would say that is consistent with our current rules and regulations, and for the applicant to consider subdivision rules and regulations tree list that was considered at said meeting.
Okay.
I can add that.
Yeah, excuse me. I mean, Larry, I see no problem with it. I mean, if you want, I can email you the list. I have it. It shouldn't be, whether it's approved now or later, shouldn't be a big deal.
Perfect.
I'll just add, Bradford pears have been deemed to be illegal in Massachusetts now, as they've been labeled as invasive species.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the reasons we removed them. It was recommended. I don't know if it was by you, Shane, or by DPW that we get rid of them. So. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Silva or for staff from the board? Or for Mrs. Baptiste? Any public comment at this time?
Just looking at the chat, Mr. Chair, and And I don't see any virtual hands raised.
Okay, so no public comment, no board comments. If there are no staff comments, do we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll make the motion to close the public hearing.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So motion by Mr. Jemian, second by Mr. McDonald. Any discussion on closing the public hearing? Okay, Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Ms. Rojas,
Yeah.
Mr. Jemian,
Yes,
and I'm a yes.
Pat, as well, I just for consistency, MJ did file a Mullen form for this one too, so she is able to participate.
Oh, okay. I'm so confused. All right.
I apologize, yeah.
So, all right, I'll just add the vote then. So, Ms. Pagone,
Yes.
I apologize. I'm so used to associates just being on special permits, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
All right, so deliberation, is there anything we want to talk about before we consider a vote on this project? I think go ahead, Mr. O'Brien.
Sure. I added some in terms of comments that were kind of different than the previous memos. And even just in discussing with Mr. Silva as well. And there was a project that was before us recently in terms of street acceptances, but suggesting language to be added stating within the decision that the roadway shall remain a private way as required by our subdivision rules and regulations, to kind of leave out language where it would be suggested that they would leave a maintenance bond or the road would be accepted by the town. So I would say that the road would remain a private way, so there would be no discrepancies and issues in the future, as well as some language in terms of conditioning this approval based on the ability for the applicant to loop the water line with the adjacent school property.
Or back out to North Street, correct?
Correct. So where the plan in front of us has it looping through the other way, but the allowance of the applicant to come back for a minor modification if it's
Or
deemed
do we just want to say right now, either the water line has to be looped, and how they handle that's with the water department? Right, I mean, that's a water department issue. If it comes back to North Street, it goes out to the school property. Does that matter to us from a planning perspective?
It is shown on the plan to do so, so I would say yes.
Okay. What about Shane? What about the homeowners association running with the chain of title, showing the responsibilities of the road maintenance? That will all be in there, correct?
Correct. I can add that if it's not already there, and that we receive a draft of the homeowners association.
Well, typically on the one to four lot subdivisions, that has to be recorded prior to like the first CO, and it has to be run with the chain of title on each lot.
That is correct. Let me just make sure that that's
It's typically not in our standard rules because it's only applicable to the 1 to 4.
You're right. It's applicable to, it's language within our subdivision rules and regulations. So we would typically ask for all applicants to provide for it unless they request a waiver through this process. So I can add that condition from our subdivision rules and regulations as part of it, just so it's consistent with the decision.
And I think it says in our rules and regs, I can pull them up, but it should say that an HOA has to be established prior to like the first CO.
That is correct.
On all lots, outlining the responsibilities of the roadway and the drainage, and forming that HOA.
Yeah, and that language is, I believe, to be recorded as well prior to the CO.
Correct, and run with the chain of title on all lots. Okay. And then what about you'll add the comment about complying with the tree planting schedule and the tree list that we have, because
yes.
Right now that plan has gaps in it.
It would be to comply with the current subdivision rules and regulations, and the applicant to consider being consistent with the tree list and rules and regulations for tree types approved at the same meeting. But I can make it.
And it doesn't. That site's pretty flat. It doesn't look like there's gonna be any material leaving, but I think in the future we should have a condition that if our zoning says if materials leaving the site, like a gravel mining operation, that requires another special permit?
I would say that earth removal is an item that is consistent with town council. So in terms of an if something qualifies for an earth removal permit, that would be something that would require a council action. So that would be consistent with other.
In the zoning with a special permit granting authority for it, the planning board. But I just, in the future, we just had a situation where somebody had mentioned something to me about a large gravel operation. And as part of the subdivision approval. And there's no special permit for pulling that material out of there. So I just think we should be cognizant of that in the future, but I don't know if we need to add it for this one or not.
I would say that we are the only thing that I can see with earth removal in regards to our ordinance, Pat, is regarding the aquifer overlay district.
No, it's in the table of uses. Last section. Talks about material coming off a site. Sorry, we can talk about it later. I don't think.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
If there is material coming off the site, we should just note that it requires a special permit. That's all.
Sure. Okay.
So trees, HOA, tree list. Any either standard conditions, anything else we want to talk about? All right. Do we have a motion to approve, a motion to deny?
Make a motion to approve with the normal conditions and the ones that were just stated by town planner.
I'll second.
Mr. McDonald, just for discussion. Shane, we don't need to restate all those. You got them. They're recorded, right?
That is correct. And just an additional comment, there are no waivers being requested for this subdivision project, so it is consistent with our rules and regulations.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Jemian. There's a second by Mr. McDonald, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I'll take the roll. Ms. Ross,
Yes.
Ms. Pagon,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Jemian.
Yes.
I'm a yes. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You. Oh, I guess one question, Larry, in terms of maybe it's a discussion we'll have in the future, but I'll just note with the board in terms of looking for a covenant or a cash bond for this project. If you could talk to your the property owner in terms of what they're looking to do in the future.
Well, that'll be put in the condition as well, right? But
correct. I just want to know for beforehand or
as to which one's going to be the choice.
Well, we typically do both, right? We'll have a cash bond for the project. We always have.
Mhm.
So there'll be a bond calculation, just like we have done with all the other 1 to 4 lot subdivisions, plus a covenant.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. All right. Item 3, planning board hearing, subdivision rules and regulations. Mr. O'Brien?
Sure thing. All right, so I did provide to the board an updated planning board list of rules and regulations, consistent with what we were talking about earlier. So let me just pull this down to a red line version. So everyone saw everything, everyone got everything, everyone was able to read everything. I know we discussed some regulation changes last year, actually, that we had taken care of earlier this year. But let me.
Shane, we have it in front of us, but could you are going to share it for.
I am. I just want to. Give me 1 second. So the red line version that we have in front of us would be, of course, taking out the crabapple, evergreens, fir, hemlock, spruce, flowering pear. And based on the updated tree list, we would be including the American linden, as well as the genus and species, the American sweet gum, American wild plum, American beech, black oak, flowering cherry, the honey locust, pagoda dogwood, the pin oak, the red maple, the river birch, the Shablo serviceberry, the sourwood, sugar maple, tulip tree, tupelo, and white oak. And I believe this is consistent with the list that our tree committee member Ray Ajemian has provided to us.
I checked it, it is.
Cool. So if anyone has any questions, comments, concerns about everything,
Yeah,
happy
I think this just gives people more options too, right? So it's, you know, we get rid of the problem pear tree, and then the crab apple tree, and we added a bunch of stuff. So I think it's a good thing.
yeah, I think it's consistent with what the tree committee is looking at, as well as we want to maintain that consistency with subdivisions in the future.
Okay. And that's the only change you're presenting this evening, correct, Mr. O'Brien?
That is correct.
Okay. Mr. Ajemian, since this is something you've worked on, do you have any comments?
No, I checked it, it's fine. It's what we recommended.
Do we have any additional staff comments, board questions or comments? Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this? Okay, if not, do we have a motion to accept the amendment to the planning board rules and regulations?
So moved.
And Mr. McDonald, do we have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Ajemian, any discussion? Mr. Ajemian,
Yes.
Ms. Rojas,
Yes.
Ms. Pagone,
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray and Shane, for taking care of that.
No problem.
Item 4, other planning board items, we request for release of funds, South Farm Estates, MJM Construction Corp. Incorporated. Mr. O'Brien.
Sure thing. We received a request for the release of remaining funds over for South Farm Estates. So we are currently holding, and let me just pull that up quickly. I believe the last time this was for the board, we were looking at accepting a check for the release of the 2 lots. So we received a check of, let me just pull that up quickly. Sorry, I've got Old North Estates in front of me. We were holding about $29,535. And from our understanding, based on the information provided from Mr. Tanzi, that the work has been completed, as well as we have received an as-built plan of that project. The South Farm Way has not been accepted as a public way, nor will it, based on the planning board decision. So from our understanding and based on Greg's review, the work has been completed for the roadway. So if you have any questions my way, or the applicant is here.
My only concern is, and I know all the road work's done, is that there's still a major condition for that subdivision, that property be placed in a conservation restriction in perpetuity. And as far as I know, that's not done. There was some language about an easement being done that the new owner of that lot 2 had provided to us, Mr. O'Brien.
That is correct. You and I reviewed that language, and then we've kind of decided that it didn't certify the allowance for the certificate of occupancy for the second house, and that a conservation restriction would still be necessitated to fulfill the condition. I believe it's 27.
So I don't want to deny the bond release, but I'd like to continue it maybe out a month and to see some progress on that conservation restriction. We've been chasing this around for over a year. We received a letter from Mr. Bajinga last June stating he was working with Wildlands Trust to take the property over. I'd just like to have this issue resolved before we close the neighborhood out, release the final money. Any other thoughts?
I mean, may I speak?
Sure,
Oh,
Mr. Bajinga, go ahead.
We're working on it. It's not a project that gets done in a day or even 6 months. It's a slow wheel that turns over there to get anything done. And again, we have 2 lots that the building occupancy cannot be done unless this is in. So it's in our best interest that we get it done. Just it's not a easy task. So for us to have a move in, we have to have this occupancy. It just seems like we're trying to hold off, work that's been completed, work that's done, and it's, obviously money that we need back in the company that's been out there for over a year now. We would just like to get it back in because it is cash flow. So
from what I understand, though, from Mr. Burke's letter last week, that lot's been sold to another party. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I'm just uncomfortable having a condition tied to somebody else when the condition should be tied to MJM, or you know what I mean? So that's our only leverage to get that done.
But it's really not, because you still have to get the occupancy permit in the deed. It's recorded that it can only be used, and technically it has been turned over to a wildlife trust that's in the deed, that only the homeowners association are allowed to use it. Because what we don't want it to do is go into a wildlife trust where it's used for, activities. We want it to remain natural, and the taxes and all that is to be paid with the lot that's been sold. So it's all recorded in the deed.
Right. But to do that properly, there's a conservation restriction program, and there needs to be a third party that holds that restriction. I think I sent that over to Mr. O'Brien. There's a review process through the state. So I would like to see that process completed. I mean, I know we talked about this a year ago, either putting the CR on it or going to Wildlands Trust. And we're at the same spot we were a year ago. So I don't want to deny the request, but I'd like to kick it out a month to see where we are with progress in the open space.
But I mean, we can hold it a year, a month or 2 months. It's not a process that's going to be done probably till November, December. But meanwhile, we fulfilled our obligations. It's just slowing up our cash flow.
Well, you haven't. It's not in a conservation restriction yet.
But it is. It's already deeded in a conservation. Mr. O'Brien has it that it's in a conservation restriction inside the HOA.
We have a conservation. We have a conservation easement,
which it says in that restriction that basically it cannot be built on. It cannot be built on, and it's tied to that lot. And per the guidelines, I don't know, and I don't have them in front of me, but per the guidelines, nobody can go build on that lot. That was the intent of that decision.
Who holds the restriction?
Mr. O'Brien has it.
No. Who's the holder of the restriction?
The HOA.
Right, but the HOA can't hold its own restriction.
But it is, because I bought it. We sold the lot. And then the HOA of 4 lots that are there, are holding basically a vote of it.
I think, Mr. O'Brien, you have a copy of the state CR program, correct?
I did provide that, but I believe in the language of the decision, it did state that it was either the homeowners, so the conservation restriction can be held by the HOA or a nonprofit.
No, the HOA can own the land. They can't hold the restriction. Somebody owns the land, somebody holds the restriction. And all they have to do is, there's a woman named Denise Pyrus. She walks you through the whole thing at the state. There's a state concept.
Go ahead.
There's a state conservation restriction program. Very easy to do. There's a template right online. It's just enforcement becomes the issue, and we're dealing with this on another neighborhood. So I think it needs to be done properly.
In regards to enforcement, Pat, as well, we did at a previous meeting did modify that condition of a decision to go from the first certificate of occupancy to the second certificate of occupancy. So that would be kind of what we would be holding at this time.
Right, but Mr. Bajinga doesn't control that lot anymore.
We control the.
I just think we should wait a month and see where we are with the CR review program. That's all. I don't want to deny the request, but
you kind of are. I mean, at the end of the day, it's putting our harmful on our cash flow problem. That's why we went to this week.
Mr. Bajinga, it was supposed to be done before the first occupancy, then the second occupancy, and now it still isn't done a year later.
but it doesn't turn that easy. Like, I understand what you're saying, but you don't get these people to move in 6 months or a year. And
Have
you
you,
say it's
have,
that
you- have,
simple.
you- have you
Yes, we
started,
have.
have you started to
Yes, we
see
have.
out?
We have. We were in touch with Wildlife Trust to donate them the land, and we went this other route with the HOA because those people just didn't turn. Like, you can call them yourselves. It just doesn't work that simple. It's a year, if not more, out. And you say that this filing is simple. I would love to sit down with you and help me go through this, because Mr. Burke can't do it that simple.
It's right online.
It's
CR review
always
program.
online, but you can't get the people to respond to you within, like, I mean, you have the authority to hold up the bond release, which is, it is what it is. We'll just try to do our best to get it released.
That's just my opinion. I'd like to hold off on the bond release until we have that resolved. Any other board comments?
I think we can wait a month, try to get this straightened out.
So put it on for an update on October 4th, to consider it.
Yeah,
Do you want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to put this off till October 4th.
Any other board members have comments?
I made the motion. You need a second.
Oh,
I'll
sorry.
second.
I'm sorry. Mr. McDonald, second. Any discussion from board members? I'll take the roll. Mr. McDonald,
Yes.
Mr. Jemian,
Yes,
Ms. Pagon,
Yes.
Ms. Rojas,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Thank you, Mr. Vajenga. So item 4, the second item, we have a request for release of remaining funds, Cranmore Estates. This is a rescinded subdivision, Cranmore Estates LLC. Mr. O'Brien, we received some info from you on that. And Mr. Silva, are you here to represent the applicant?
Yes, I am.
So go ahead, sir.
No, we had originally requested this at the time that we were rescinding the subdivision. The board asked that not be taken up at the same time, that they wanted to get through the rescission process. So we followed up with the request. Everything has been transferred over, and it's all in control of Jim Welsh and Ashmont.
So just out of curiosity, the money was placed by Mr. Gummo, correct?
And he was paid by Mr. Welsh the exact amount.
So I know we asked for something I mean, how can we return funds out of an account that are held for a certain individual to another individual without legal paperwork?
There is legal paperwork.
Do we have that, Mr. O'Brien?
We did receive a notarized letter stating from Mr. Gummo that Cranmore Drive LLC is the owner of all lots in the subdivision, and that was provided as part of the packets.
Will that satisfy the treasurer's office in releasing funds to a third party?
It's a fair question. I assume so, because we've had situations even on the previous project where actually previous project's not a good example, but we do have a history within the town of people purchasing subdivisions and selling them to other people.
But the bond money is typically placed by the person that acquires it, right?
Yes. So I think if we can provide a letter to the treasurer's office that Cranmore Drive LLC is the sole owner of the bond at this time, and that they would be receiving the funds as well. So I would be providing a letter to Scott Boyce anyways, stating that. So it would be a more complicated letter than releasing all the funds back to the applicant. It'd be releasing the funds to such and such and doing a new address, new account, and a new, I would say a new wiring number. So I would be working with Cranmore Drive LLC and the treasurer's office through this process.
So we could vote to release the funds, but then have you handle any legal piece that we need to make sure it's done correctly, correct?
That is correct. You can have me do that.
Just to make sure the town's not on the hook for giving the money to the wrong person. I just think there should be a legal document stating that Mr. Gummo has released those lots that he already sold the lots, but did he release those funds to a third party, to the purchaser? I think-
I would say that
He did, and he also, there's a document that says that he was paid the exact bond amount in order to transfer that over.
so. This is the notarized letter that we received on October 18th.
Right. So on, right? Mr. Boyce might need something saying he's entitled to those funds, though. So that's all. But
Sure thing.
you'll. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Boyce is going to make sure that he's returning it to the correct party.
Correct. We don't want to get into a situation where we're wiring someone the incorrect money.
Okay. And Shane, from your correspondence, everything seems good to release, correct?
That is correct. So I believe this is the correct amount to be held. I believe that number is 34,140.
That's correct.
I guess my only question was to the board. It was, and this is kind of a unique situation in regards to the a non-refundable stormwater maintenance fee, being that the subdivision has been rescinded. I just kind of want to ask the board's opinion on a matter of this in terms of that maintenance fee, because essentially this project is not becoming a site plan or not becoming a private way or a public way, but essentially its own site plan review, where we don't require a stormwater maintenance fee.
I don't see how we could hold the 5,000. So, for an example, on Trinity Circle, when that was when that became an HOA, instead of going before the town for acceptance, we returned the 5,000 or 10,000. Now that they came back to this for street acceptance, we asked for that 5,000 or 10,000 back. So I'd say we have to release it.
Yeah, and I think in the future, I think we've discussed this in the future as well, that we don't want to be holding maintenance fees within a bond amount, because that allows it to gain interest. So I would say that we probably should establish separate stormwater accounts in the future for particular subdivisions.
Okay. All right, Mr. O'Brien, anything else?
Nope.
All right, do we have a motion on releasing the number just went away.
Oh, I'm sorry. I figure you guys wanted to see your faces.
34,140, was it?
That
Yep.
is correct, with whatever including interest. So it'd be remaining funds.
Do we have a motion to do that?
So moved.
By Mr. McDonald, do we have a second?
I can second.
By Ms. Rojas, any discussion? I'd just note for the record, Shane, that we have the proper, legal documentation needed, and it's discussed with Mr. Boyce prior to releasing any money to an individual that didn't place the bond.
That is fine. I will do so.
So do we have any other discussion? I'll take the roll. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I did have a quick question, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Go ahead,
So-
Ms. Pagan.
I just want to make sure I'm hearing this correctly. We would be refunding this bond money to an individual who isn't the original submitter of the bond money?
Correct.
I'm not really sure. I mean,
I think you have to look at the closing documents to see whether or not there was any documentation indicating that, the bond or any other assets were being transferred over.
We're probably going to need some legal documentation, so.
yeah,
That's why
I'm kind of ambivalent towards this, just because usually when a bond is submitted, it's submitted by a certain entity, and then when the bond needs to be either returned or rescinded, it's usually returned to said entity who submitted it in the first place. The fact that we're doing this from one entity to a totally separate entity.
Well, we're not really doing it to a separate entity. Mr. Welsh has assumed all ownership of everything, all the assets of Cranmore.
Well, the other thing too is we don't write the check, so we're just voting to release the money.
Yeah.
I think it's up to the town to figure out what legal documentation they need to release it to a third party.
Yeah, I mean, it could come down to that they want Clive to actually acknowledge it when they release it at that point to it.
Because it's going to get into other things like who's the interest is going to get reported to probably Clive's social security number or something like that. So I mean, they're going to need something.
Yeah.
So it might be a dual check. I don't know. It might be a check that's not the both. I don't know.
So Ms. Pagone, I think that I just want, if you're comfortable with it, I just want to make it very clear tonight that we're okay with releasing the bond. But whatever legal documentation is needed by the town to make that happen to Mr. Welch as opposed to Mr. Gummo, the town should obviously get that.
I guess the other question I have, Mr. Chairman, is this a typical practice that we've had happen in the past? Or is there precedent for this?
I don't think we've ever had this happen. I mean, since I've been on the board. But I think that's why we're just making it very clear that the treasurer's office gets the proper legal documentation.
Okay.
So we had a motion and a second. I started to take the roll with Ms. Rojas. Ms. Rojas?
Yes.
Ms. Pagone?
No.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, thank you very much.
I'll keep you all in the
Thank you.
loop on that.
And Shane, anything else that you need by way of document between Clive and Mr. Welsh, I'm sure that Mr. Welsh would be able to provide that.
Yeah, and if there's any hiccups, I'm gladly.
Yeah, whatever Mr.
I'm happy
Welsh
to bring this back to the board in terms of a discussion as well. I want to keep this an open, transparent discussion with the board as well.
I mean,
So,
I think it's as simple as going to Mr. Boyce and saying, "Hey, we had somebody
Yeah,
placed
what do
the
you
bond,
need to release it to?
somebody else bought it. What do you need to release it to a third party?" He might say he can't, or I need X, Y, and Z. So
sure, and then we'll be back before this board, and then we can have discussions with, I guess,
Right.
Mr.
Well, he may have to, I mean, worst case, I think worst case would be is he'd have to release it in some way to Clive, and Clive would hand it over to Jimmy Walsh.
I mean, typically it would
That's
go
what
to
might happen.
or it'd go to the attorney, and the attorney would put it in his IOTA and then cut a check, right?
Yeah,
So-
something like that.
All right. Other business. We have minutes from June 21, July 19, and August 2nd, all in the year 2023. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
And Mr. Jemian, do we have a second? Everyone still awake? Second?
I can second that.
Ms. Rojas?
Yes.
Any discussion on the minutes? I'll take the roll. Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
Ms. Rojas?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
Ms. Pagone?
Yes.
Let me yes. Shane, you're up. Board items for the next meeting.
Board items for the next meeting. We're gonna have a minor site plan before the board. The ad is run for some parking. We have Claremont on the next meeting. We have a minor modification from a project that was recently approved for 31 Perkins Street. And then we do have another modification to a previously approved site plan that I will be receiving soon. That'll be on for the October 4th meeting. So some new stuff on the agenda, but nothing that we can't handle.
The hotel is on the next meeting as well. Is that correct?
Yes, and just
Thought you said
to state, following up with the board, we have talked with Attorney Rollins, and we're working with him to kind of answer the questions that the board had at that previous meeting. So we are working on it, and we have had a conversation with Attorney Rollins.
Okay. Any board committee reports, Mr. Jemian? Has your board met? Any other boards met that we need to have updates on?
We'll meet next week. I'll have something at next meeting.
Mr. Rulli or Mr. O'Brien?
Yeah, I
Reports?
just want to mention that next Friday, September 15th at 11:45, Metro South Chamber is having Bridgewater Day at Old Scotland Links. It's sponsored by Rockland Bank, but underwritten by the town. There'll be a presentation on vision to reality, but there also will be a panel discussion with Michael Dutton, the mayor of Brockton, Michael Lambert from BAT, Peter Milano from the State Office of Business Development, and Matt Zeller, who just completed the school project. And that panel will be chaired by Fred Clark, president of BSU. The town does have some seating available, so if any members of the planning board wanted to go, the town is happy to cover your admission. We just need to know by tomorrow.
What time is that, Mr.
At
Roy?
11:45 to just after 1 o'clock.
The 15th.
And I think there's over 100 people that have already committed to attend, so just extending the invitation.
Okay, Mr. O'Brien?
Yeah, just one thing, just of note, I know the board approved it at a couple meetings ago, and that was the rescission of the Cranmore Estates plan. But the board at that meeting also wanted to approve and sign off on that plan. So we did receive the Mylar for the 81, not the 81W rescission plan.
81X or 81W?
I think it's an 81W plan based on this. So either or, that the board voted for that plan during the rescission. So that plan is available for you to sign, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to come in anytime this week.
Okay. Great.
But
any other board members have any comments? Ms. Jane, you good? Mr. Solari? Mr. Tanzi? All set?
Yeah,
All good.
I'm all set.
All right, if we have nothing else, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Shane, you said an hour, 51 minutes.
Hey, I'm proud of you.
All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr.
Yeah,
Silva, go ahead.
we
Mr.
have
Silva?
we have a
Mr. Sil-
motion. with-
Mr. Silva, you're on stage. Do you have
I
something
said
to
I
say?
could talk for 9 if you'd like.
No, we're good.
No,
Okay.
okay.
Do you
No, we
charge,
do have
you charge too much?
We do have a motion from Ray.
Motion from Ray, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. McDonald? Take the roll, Ms. Rojas? Ms. Pagan?
Yes.
Mr. Jemian?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Good night, everyone.
All right.
Stay
Thank
cool
you, guys.
tomorrow.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Stay cool.